The Justice Department and the FBI tried to destroy our country, our republic, by going after Trump and his supporters. And it didn't happen 10 years ago. It wasn't Lois Lerner 15 years ago. It was last year it was going on. I think the other big news this week was the defeat of Ed Martin to be U.S. Attorney for here in the District of Columbia. The District of Columbia U.S. Attorney is significant because it's Washington, D.C. It's a very powerful office. I don't know if I think it's the biggest U.S. Attorney's office in the city, in the country. I mean, New York's might be bigger, but the point is it's significant. And obviously, it's the nation's capital. And it was this U.S. Attorney's office, for instance, under Biden, that was really the focus point of the January 6th jihad campaign against anyone who disputed the 2020 election, the January 6th defendants. And Ed Martin is a patriot, an activist who took his job seriously. He was placed as acting U.S. attorney. So he had the temporary powers of U.S. attorney, but he was seeking confirmation at the Senate. And typically, U.S. attorneys are confirmed without even a hearing, just what they call voice votes. But Republicans didn't like Ed Martin because he was in his prior life a defender of January 6th defendants and targets, and a brave defender. When everyone else had abandoned them, practically speaking, he stood with them. And he was punished. He essentially lost. The president had to withdraw his confirmation, and at least publicly, because of one senator, Senator Tom Tillis. Now, Senator Tillis had a meeting or meetings about the nomination of Ed Martin. And I reported on the meeting in this tweet here. So I highlighted what I understood to have happened in these meetings in this tweet. Outrageous. I understand that Senator Tom Tillis mocked the shooting death of Ashley Babbitt in discussions over support for Ed Martin. Ed deserves a medal for defending Donald Trump and Americans abusively targeted by the Biden regime over January 6th. And Tillis himself has said, oh, the only reason I oppose Martin was because of January 6th, his defense of January 6th defendant. You know, look, that's his constitutional right, and people will object to that politically. I understand that. But what I found, as I said, outrageous is his attack of Ashley Babbitt. Now, one might argue, well, maybe he doesn't know the full story about how Ashley was ambushed by a police officer who shooted blindly at her, as other Americans are there, law enforcement personnel are there, shooting essentially into a crowd. And he's essentially mocking the circumstances of her death, suggesting that, you know, what did she expect? Senator Tillis should apologize to Ashley's family. Really, he should apologize. And so Tillis, you know, his public objection to Ed, who's a friend of mine, caused other Republicans supposedly behind the scenes to break away as well. And so the president, you know, really had no choice but to pull the nomination. I mean, that was the political reality of it. I guess he could have, you know, spent the next 3 months trying to get him in there, but that was not going to probably happen. And he's got, you know, I recognize that nominations rise and fall sometimes, however seemingly unfair it is. But Ed was, by President Trump, placed in the Justice Department to help run the weaponization task force that Attorney General Bondi put up. So maybe he'll be in a more powerful position in the Justice Department to prosecute the deep state actors that targeted Trump. We'll see. Now, you know, I'm suspicious of the whole DOJ operation, and I don't trust the DOJ to do much of an investigation. But I am happy that Ed is over there, because I know his being there will more likely ensure something gets done in the way I want it to get done. So it's a positive development in the end. it's the lemonade out of the lemon of Ed being removed from the U.S. attorney slot or his nomination failing. But on the other hand, our friend Judge Jeanine Pirro was just placed as acting U.S. attorney to replace Ed. Now, I guess I could think of a lot of good people to replace Ed Martin as U.S. attorney. I would be it would be a stretch to find fewer that I would trust more than Judge Jeanine to do it. And so she's an excellent pick by President Trump. She has significant experience as a prosecutor, significant experience as a prosecutor. She was the elected prosecutor, as I recall, for Westchester County, New York, a major county up in New York State, and Westchester has all sort. It's a kind of a it ranges from the rural to the suburban to the urban. So they have the whole panoply of criminality in that jurisdiction. And because it's New York, there's a lot of political corruption as well. So she's well placed and well situated and really well qualified to take on these issues. And Tom Tillis immediately, I think, endorsed her. So hopefully she gets confirmed ultimately and quickly. But it highlights and the reason I'm talking about this is because this is where, at least right now, the rubber meets the road on serious criminal investigations or prosecutions of the weaponization targeting Trump. The Justice Department and the FBI tried to destroy our country, our republic, by going after Trump and his supporters. And it didn't happen 10 years ago. It wasn't Lois Lerner 15 years ago. It was last year it was going on. So I think there needs to be emergency action. There has to be urgency in addressing this in a very public, powerful, and inescapably noticeable way. And I was on Steve Bannon's program this week talking about that. I think the president should set up an independent prosecutor's office, an independent investigative unit. I don't trust the FBI. I don't trust the Justice Department to investigate their own agency's actions, even if Ed Martin's over there, even if Kash Patel's over there, even if Pam Bondi's over there, even if Judge Jeanine is over there. I think the Justice Department should be investigated by people outside the Justice Department. The FBI should be investigated by people outside the FBI. And the president, prosecutorially speaking, can do all of that by setting up an outside investigative unit that has all the authority under law to proceed with criminal investigations and, if warranted, prosecutions. So there's an option there if the president chooses to take it. When you look at the history of the founding of our country, you'll see that presidents exercise prosecutorial authority from the beginning. George Washington, John Adams, President Jefferson, President Madison, Andrew Jackson, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Ronald Reagan. So Trump it's not only in the Constitution, but significant precedent to, technically speaking, he could literally go into court. I'm not quite sure if the court rules might allow this, but he has the power to prosecute and if he wanted to run the prosecution in the courtroom. He could be as micromanaging as he wants when it comes to ensuring as the chief executive that the laws are enforced and executed. So the Justice Department has authorities under law and the Constitution to prosecute, and many of those authorities basically flow from the President of the United States. So I believe that President Trump should take advantage of his constitutional powers and ensure that something's done. Because if something's not done, or they do a few mild things, we'll be back at square one again. And the left will use the FBI and Justice Department and proceed with their plan, which we saw in operation for years, to destroy our constitutional republic by turning the FBI and the Justice Department into political police to target their opposition. And of course, in the meantime, Judicial Watch will continue with our litigation and our investigations and our public education to push for the full truth and our measure of accountability on what went on. And hopefully that will provide additional leadership to the Justice Department, the FBI, and my friend President Trump to proceed forthwith for full accountability through the criminal process as appropriate. And and I'm not suggesting, despite what the left might think, or maybe what you may be under a misimpression, that we need mass arrests or that has to happen. It might have to happen if there's evidence of criminal activity. But, we're not even at that point where the criminal activity has even been pursued in terms of the basic investigatory steps or investigative steps. Investigatory, I don't think is a real word in this context. So you know what I mean. We got to just get the ball rolling. And it might lead to arrests. It might lead to prosecutions. It might not. In the end, maybe there's no prosecution to be pursued, or not as broadly as I'm thinking. But I want that issue to be resolved through a process that I trust, and the American people want a process that they can trust. So this Ed Martin case, it's not about Ed Martin. And this is why I'm convinced the left had focused on him, because it wasn't always about what Ed Martin was. It was about what Ed Martin represented. And here I talked about it a little bit on the Blaze TV, Blaze TV the other day. Ed Martin is feared by the left. The minority leader, Chuck Schumer, my understanding was going around going after him personally with Republican senators. Schumer's mad at Martin because Martin asked him some tough questions and initiated an investigation that he eventually stopped into whether he broke the law in threatening Supreme Court justices. Adam Schiff has had it in for Ed Martin. And so to me, that's all you need to know if you're a conservative or a Republican on the Hill as to what this is about. This isn't about January 6th. This isn't about crime in D.C. This is about left-wing Democrats, the abusers of Trump, who engage in lawfare, being nervous about having someone in office who might hold them accountable. And I'm hoping Tom Tillis sees that over the next few days and gets over what seems to be his PTSD from January 6th and get a law and order guy into this U.S. attorney's seat, the pick that President Trump wants. And I just want to say something in addition about Ed Martin. He's been smeared. He's been attacked. Look at this. He was just assaulted outside his office the other day. Watch this video.
So we need to get really focused.
Who the fuck are you? You are Ed Martin.
How you doing? Whoa.
So this is the violent left, the kind of a dramatic exhibit of the violent left. And Ed Martin, I'm glad he was wearing that raincoat, right? He was spit upon. But it ain't funny. And these leftists are dangerous. It's not they just want to prosecute us. Too many of these extremists want to do worse. I mean, President Trump learned that. He was nearly killed twice by these crazy. These are dangerous times, and it's good that President Trump is in office to mitigate these issues. And there are people that we can trust much more than someone like Merrick Garland. But it's, again, difficult to overstate the emergency nature of what they did to us and what needs to be done to mitigate and protect and gain accountability for their crimes against what I believe the Republic.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.